So I got home from work and I sat down and I had another series in mind to watch. And then I poured myself a glass of wine, Chan, and thought, I want to watch Tsurune. So here I am. Cheers! Wine Chan has joined us to watch episode 8 of Tsurune. Episode 8 in a 12 to 13 episode series is always special to me. It is my Romania Black's rule of 8. And the reason for that is that normally in a 12 to 13 episode series or a season, you have a 3-act structure per season. You have the very start of the season, you have the middle of the season, and you have the end of the season. And I would argue that around episode 4 to 5 is where you get into the second part. And around episode 8 and 9 is where you conclude the second part and you get into the final act. And usually episode 8, where you're concluding that second part and getting into the conclusion act, is usually a really good episode. The rule of 8 stands. The 8th episode of any 12 to 13 episode series season is going to be good. And so we are on it with Tsurune, and the last 3 episodes have been amazing. So because of that, and because I am like paranoid of spoilers, I am watching a little bit ahead because I'm terrified because nobody's outright spoiled, but there's been people in the comments be like, maybe you should pay attention to this. And I'm like, please don't tell me that. Don't spoil, because I'm not dumb, first of all. And I'm very, very like I get hyper focused on a show. And so when someone's like, maybe you should pay attention to this, then my mind starts working. And sometimes, usually I figure out the spoiler before it happens, and then I'm not surprised. And then you all get to watch me be not surprised. So I for reactions, I don't like that. So, and I've had a few, like Tony Simi and I were talking on Patreon, where like Tony Simi's like, I watched this show 3 to 4 times and I never got the impression Kaido and now are cousins. And I'm like, I haven't either, but people in the comments keep saying that they are. So I don't know if it's a light novel thing that's just not brought up in the season, or if it's something that's going to come out in season 2 and y'all are spoiling me. I don't know. If that does bring up the light novel thing. I've had a few people in the comments try to bring up light novel things. Please do not, because I will not read them. I will not read any comments that start talking about the light novels. 1, because it could contain content that will show up in season 2 that hasn't been adapted yet. I don't want spoilers. And 2, because I may want to read the light novels if they're translated into English. And if you tell me the content of the light novels, then what's the point of me reading them? As an English teacher, I have read so many papers on the Hunger Games. I've never read the Hunger Games, and I never will, because everyone has spoiled the entire plot to me. So I'm like, what's the point? So for the sake of that, please, if you want to talk light novel spoilers, y'all can talk in the comments, but please spoiler tag so that I don't see them. If I get any inclination that there is a spoiler, a hint, a clue, a not light novel thing that you're talking about, I just sadly will not be able to read your comment, and I'll just move on. So, and I don't want to do that. I want to read your comments because y'all have cool things to say, but I'm also not going to risk being spoiled because I like how surprising this series has been. So that's my soapbox, but I poured myself a glass of wine, Chan, and was like, I really want to watch episode 8, because episode 7, the tension with Fujiwara, the tension with Kaido, the tension between Seiya Minato and Fujiwara, the twins being little shits, like Nanao's tension, like it's all just there, and I'm ready to see what's going to happen. And we're now facing the group tournament day. I said this in the last episode, it's kind of like Free, where in Free, right around episode 6 and 7, it like took off, the season did, and the angst kicked in and it got really good. And that's how I feel with this season. Like, Kiwani knows their stuff. They know how this formula works, and I'm here for it. So yeah, I'm here for it. So yeah, pour myself a glass of wine, sit down and be like, you know what? Let's watch Tsurune and just see what happens. Just see what happens. What could it be? So I'm really excited. I have no clue what's coming, but thank you all so much for your comments. I hope you all are enjoying the reactions. Again, I want to read everyone's comments, but I just don't want to be spoiled. So I'm very, very cautious about that. You all know that. So if you do have a really cool comment and I happen to skip over it because I think there's a spoiler, I'm sorry. It's just me wanting to be as blind as possible going into this and to avoid being remotely spoiled. So, or getting hints or clues. But with that being said, let's not waste any more time. I got home from work, and again, I had something else planned for tonight. I usually map out my, like, what I'm going to react to each day, and tonight I was like, I just wasn't feeling the other show. I sat down and watched it, and I, like, sat at my screen for, like, a good 30 minutes, checked my email, and I was like, I'm just not feeling it. And then I was like, well, I need to watch something else instead, and I thought, I want to watch Tsurune. So, yep, gonna do it, but we're going to start episode 8 of Tsurune and just see what happens. Why not? And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. This is a worthy successor to Free. A worthy successor. You know what? I was really afraid that Free Iwatobi Swim Club was ending, and I was like, nothing will ever fill the void of the angst and BL hype that is Free. But no, Tsurune's doing it, so there's that. Oh my god, Shu. Shu is so fascinating because he's like, what? Oh my god. I feel like we've got to get Seiya development now. We're getting development on every character except Seiya. Seiya's got to be next. We've got to complete the rainbow. We need to get all of our boys. We've gotten character development with all of them except Seiya. Seiya is the one that is missing from the group. We need him to have character development. And I guess if the show's not going to do it, Shu's going to step in and be like, hey, you don't love archery. And it's like, wait, what? But okay. There are a lot of things going into this that kind of lead to that conclusion, and I can see why Fujiwara is saying that, but we need to talk about this. There was a lot going on in this episode. It seemed like at first I was like, okay, Rule of 8 is always like an episode that goes like a crazy turn, and going into this, we've made it past the preliminaries. We're in the main tournament now. Going through this now, Seiya, who has been pretty steady in this, is going to have, you know, a crisis. And so our boys are going to have to come through and help him through it, right? But they've honestly been leading up to this for a while now, especially with the development we've gotten with the other characters. It's all kind of seemed like it's been leading to this. But yeah, there's a lot going on in this episode. And for a while, it doesn't seem like that at first because this episode is so quiet and calm. Tsurune, the vibe of Tsurune competition-wise, it's a very different kind of tense than Free. And I use Free as an example because that's KyoAni's other sports anime. Free with the competitions. I mean, Free is very similar to Tsurune in that it's less about the competition itself. The competition is a framework. It is a thing that the plot centers around, and it is a catalyst for the character's development. But Free is very much a character-driven show, which is why I love it so much, because it's all about the characters and their developments, their friendships, their bonds, their ambitions. Like, it goes through them so well, and it leads us through 3 seasons and several movies of it. Tsurune, it follows along those footsteps very nicely in that it does also center around a sport, but it's really about the characters and their development, right? It's really about them. And the sport just kind of is a thing, a framework that they can develop within. So yeah, so we got that. But Shu is such an interesting character. We'll talk about him. Talk about him and his whole thing and his personality and character traits. We'll talk about that. But also, we'll talk about that as well as talking about the characters and where they're at in terms of how they feel about archery, right? And so I guess we need to talk about archery and our boys, right? So we have archery, and I want to talk about, we have Ryohei, we have Nanao, we have Kaido, and I probably should have put them in the order that they shoot, but you know what? What can we do? And so then we'll do Seiya. I'm not going to erase it. And then I'm going to put Fujiwara over here. Our would-be home wrecker. I was like, oh my god! I was like, but Seiya did kind of insert himself in the moment. To be fair, Seiya did bring up the whole thing with Minato himself, and Shu just fired it right back. So he just went, plucked the arrow right back there. And then we're going to talk about Masa over here. Oh, Masa. And his stepbrother. That's why they don't seem like they're related. They're stepbrothers. They're brothers through marriage. I'm like, oh, okay. I need a point where Ren's taking photos of him doing archery and they look at each other and like, did we just become best friends? There's so much more room for... I just want a voice clip. I'd love to make that for TikTok or something where it's like a voice clip where it's just Mamasa and the Kyoto Hall looking over to Ren and they look over. He's like, we have so much more room for activities. Like, I need that. But yeah, so we get a lot of character development. We don't focus very much on Kurosaki at all this episode. And that's a real big surprise for me because I thought as soon as Masa said that they're in the same category as Kurosaki, I was like, oh, well, this is all going to be about the competition. But that's not what Kyoto is. we've established in the last several episodes that Kyudo is really about you against yourself. It's you shooting the best that you can and not worrying about anyone else in the room. It's all about what you can do for yourself and how you can be the best so that your teammates feed off of that positive energy, right? And I think that's going to tie to why Minato is the Ochi. I think that's why it's going to tie to that, because he ends off one flow and flows right back to Kaido, right? So it's something, he's a motivator, right? So I want to put that on here, that Minato is a motivator. He motivates his team. Being the last shooter, like Kaido starts off the rhythm and it goes through, but by the time it gets to Minato, they've got to go back, and Minato, like, he tapers the end of it, right? And that positive energy he has the moment that he hits that first target carries back over to Kaido. And the fact, what I love about it is that, yeah, it starts a rhythm and they all get their shots. They end up making about the half their shots, but the second half is really good. And I'm like, well, they just need to carry that momentum into the next half. But I feel like Seiya's going to be off his game. I'm like, Fujiwara, did you just plant like a ninja grenade to try to throw them off in the actual tournament? You bastard. Talk about Fujiwara. We will talk about him. Yes, indeed. We'll talk about him and everything going on with him. So, yeah. So, anyway, this episode, I love that the first thing Masa and Tommy Sensei say is they're like, don't get worked up. And, of course, Kaido looks the most worked up, right? He just looks absolutely ridiculous. And Masa's like, I love Masa's just like, you guys look absolutely worked up. He's like, what did we just tell you, right? And Masa's a coach now, so he's approaching things differently than as a competitor. And Tommy is kind of like, skirting around. He's like, I'm not the coach, I'm your manager. He's like, come on, just relax, it's fine. And that's the whole thing, is Kyudo is about relaxing and being confident and sure of yourself. And he's like, you guys are already a bundle of nerves. And so Masa's like, I might as well just say it. He's like, I was going to save it, but you know what? You guys are already a bundle of nerves. I might as well just put it out there. Let it be known we ended up in the same block as Kurosaki. A school dropped out, so now we've been moved. They shuffled the ranges, and we'll be firing on the second range in the third group. And so, and Seiya's like, now wait a minute. The school in the first range in the third group is Kurosaki. Yeah, I like that Seiya had it already memorized. Seiya already had it memorized. So Seiya, talk about Seiya here. We'll put him up here. Seiya is, he has a good memory, which can be a bad thing. Can be a bad thing if it's something that you don't want to remember, right? And Kaido's like, yeah, we can fight him face to face and get revenge for yesterday. And I like that Masa's like, no, chill out. So Kaido, I like that now brings up the point that Kaido puts on a very tough exterior. He puts on this tough exterior to look strong, right? And to kind of back himself up. And then now it's like, that's not really how he is, but he's leaned into it. I like that phrase. He's leaned into what people have expected of him. And he's like, I got worked up and messed up a little. He's like, I messed up a little. And Masa's like, no, you messed up a lot. And he's like, I want to prove myself. And Masa's like, seriously, chill out. And everybody's like, And then, of course, I love that. Okay, so Minato's like, oh, it's the same grouping as Shu. And I like that Masa looks over like, you too? You're having problems too? Really? I love that he's like, oh, God. He's like, these problem children, these teenagers and their drama. Masa's like, how do I deal with you all? So I didn't get what Ryohei was doing at first with the strings, but now it all makes sense. Minato is thinking of Shu. This whole flashback of Minato with the shoe and the little Flash t-shirt, freaking cute. So I want to point out here the dynamic with Minato. They feel like a Twitter ship dynamic, right? Have you seen those Twitter memes where it's like the ship dynamic and you have Minato, who's the super fiery, super passionate, like, I love archery, let's do it all the time. And Fujiwara's like, yes, I like archery a lot. They're so polar opposites when they're younger, right? And I feel like Minato has gotten kind of into a rut over the years, and so it's drug his energy down a little bit, but he still has that, we still see that he has that passion within. It's just the fuse and the flame has been dimmed from the target panic, but it's still there. Like it's within Minato, and we see as a kid how fiery he was. And I like that. I wonder if Shu truly does love archery as much as Minato, or if he's been doing it so long, he doesn't think there's anything else in his life, and so it's just second nature to him. But it seems like he is inspired by Minato. He's inspired by Minato. He's like, you make me love archery. And it's like, ugh! But yeah, and then I love that the grandmother is like, today marks the end of 3 months. I've had you drawing with no arrows every day, and you never got sick of it. And I love Minato says, well, that's what it takes to make the sound someday, right? So they've practiced for 3 months without an arrow, and Minato's like, I just want to hear the sound. Come on. He's like so fiery about it. And the grandma, she's like, you precocious little kid. He's like, I'll do it as many times as it takes. And she's like, aw. She's like, next practice, you can start wearing this. And gives him the... And I love that. I love that he's so excited. He's like so blushy and like happy he gets to wear the official uniform and everything. And Shu just looks down like, like, oh, okay. And he looks over, he's like, I did it, Shu. He's like, I get to do archery with you. And Shu just has like the dead Kuroko eyes where he's just like, oh, yes. But he smiles. He has like a little tiny smile, right? Okay, I at first I didn't notice that in the reaction because I was just like floored out, emotionless he seems, but he's like, like he has a tiny little smile. So Fujiwara, Minato is very expressive, especially as a kid, and even as a teenager, he wears his emotions on his sleeve, right? Fujiwara is very guarded, and he seems stoic and emotionless. I didn't know how to phrase this in the last couple episodes, but I wondered if Fujiwara was maybe like on a spectrum, perhaps, where he could have been on a spectrum like socially, where he just doesn't emote like emotions very much, but occasionally like Minato being so passionate and gets to him, and he's just like, like he's so calm and does not express emotions hardly at all, really. And he seems kind of cold and distant sometimes, but then when he talks, you're like, no, you're not cold and distant at all. It's just like he's in your face. So I did wonder if maybe he was on a spectrum a little bit in terms of that, in terms of socially. I don't know, but he's so hard to read, right? And then we cut to Minato where he was so fiery and excited about things, and then he come back and he's just almost dreading it now, right? And Ryohei, this is when he's debating whether he does the old string or the new string. And so Ryohei, I like that his conflict is that he wants to do well. He wants to do well. And it's like tried and true versus new. And Ryohei, it makes sense why he went with the new string, because he was like, I know this works. And if I try something new and it doesn't feel right, he's like, I feel like I'll make... Again, we go back to the idea, they've been preaching this entire series, like, don't change anything the day of the tournament. Go with what your strengths are. And Ryohei's like, do I go with what I have or do I try something new? And so I don't blame him for going with the old string. I probably would have done the same if I were him. I wish he would have tested out the new string like the day before or at like a practice right before. I wish he would have done that, but he doesn't do it. Instead, he goes with the old string and decides on it, right? And he asks Seiya, and Seiya is all eyes on Minato. Seiya is all focus on Minato. He's not even thinking about what he's doing. He's focusing everything on Minato's state of being. And we'll touch back on this because Fujiwara is like, you're not doing this archery because you want to. You're doing it because of Minato. And then Ryohei's like, oh, hey, I was hoping you'd help me string my bow. And he's like, oh, sure, yeah. Which he's kind of, his focus is off track. So Kaido, take this seriously today, Nanao. At this point, I was like, I feel like Kaido he's projecting all of his anger and frustration at himself on Nanao. Because Nanao, here's the thing about Nanao. Nanao seems carefree and easygoing. Ryohei even says that. He's like, you get nervous now? You seem like you're always so chill and like fearless. But Nanao's like, yeah, I put on a really good front because I have to for Kaido. He's like, I need to. But Nanao, I feel like Nanao does take it seriously. I feel like Nanao does like archery. I feel like he does like it, but he's doing a lot for Kaido. I feel like he wouldn't like archery at all, perhaps, if Kaido wasn't involved. But he does take it seriously. He has to, he said. And I like that Nanau's like, he like looks at Kaido like, sure, yeah, I'll take it seriously. I'm like, I feel like Nanau's been taking it seriously this whole time, but Kaido just doesn't think so. And then he's like, we're getting revenge on Kurosaki who laughed at us yesterday. And they're all like, yeah. And Nanau's like, yeah, let's do it. I'm ready to fight with everything I have now. He's like, let's do it. And Kaido's like, oh, well, yes, yeah, sure. I love that Kaido's like, let's get revenge. Let's do this, guys. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it, Kaido. And he's like, yeah, I guess we can get revenge. What a tsundere. And then Ryohei's like, I'm going to do my best not to hold us back. Like, Ryohei wants to do the best. And Nanau's like, take it seriously, huh? Like, today, huh? And Nanau's like, we take it seriously all the time, right? And Nanau's like, Nanau and Seiya, I feel this episode established that Nanau and Seiya have a lot in common in that they are doing well in this sport. And I think they are taking it seriously, but they're taking it seriously on the behalf of someone else. And Kaido calls Nanau out for it, and Nanau admits it to Minato. But Seiya, I feel like we're going to get more development with Seiya. I just feel like that's going to happen. So we find out that Shiragiku, her fever's gone down, which is good. And then Rin shows up. And I'm like, at first, I like that these two girls are very apprehensive of Rin. They're like, And they're like, and Yuna says, do you think the boys can win? And I love to say, it was like, no. She has this look on her face like, I don't know about that. Before she can answer, that's when Rin shows up. And so they're like, oh, it's the coach's big brother. And he's like, I have a name, it's Rin. Which makes sense, they're stepbrothers. He's like, don't just call me, Masa's brother. It's fine. And he's like, I'm here to root for Kazumai. So he's with the press. He does journalism for the paper. I feel like he was doing a thing for the Kyudo Hall for the paper. I feel like that was it. Okay. And so now we're at group 3. And everybody comes in. Interestingly enough. And then I like that, he can instantly, Rin's like, oh, he's like, everybody's super tense. Like, everyone looks like they're super, super nervous, right? And then he's like, oh, look at Mr. Photogenic there, right? And of course it's Fujiwara. He's like, yeah. And he's the last one for his team, which I feel like his job is the same as Minato's, the young prince. He's like, that's quite the nickname. And then he instantly goes to take a photo of him, right? And so, they talk about their scuffle and everything. And the team, they just can't focus. They're so worried about defeating Shu and the others that they're throwing off their own game. They're so worried about it, right? In the first half, they don't do well at all. But I like this idea with Kyudo that you are the worst enemy. You are the enemy. And you have to conquer yourself. It's about you conquering yourself and that energy transmitting to the rest of your team, right? Which is very similar to Free, honestly, because Free is about swimming. And even when they do group competitions, it's funny because it's the same idea of connection, right? It's this idea of connection, both with Free and with Tsurune. With Free, it's much more fast-paced and it's much more like tense, but this is a different kind of tension. But both Tsurune and Free deal with this concept that you yourself are either doing archery or doing swimming to the best of your own individual ability, and it's your job for your ability to connect with your teammate and that energy just to transfer and be streamlined. And so I feel like with Kyudo, that energy from Minato at the end transfers back to his teammates. It goes back to Kaido, and Minato doing well inspires Kaido to do well, which inspires Ryohei to do well, which inspires Nanao to do well, and Seo to do well, and so on and so forth. And it's kind of the same way with Free. I feel like with Free, though, there maybe is a little bit more timing issues with the swimming than there are here, but then we run into this guy, the guy that ran the archery supplies, the Nakazaki Archery, and he talks about, like, the kid with the target practice. He talks about knowing Minato because he gave the book for it. And he says, victory is determined by purely how many arrows hit the target. If you want to win, you just have to hit. But he's like, real archery has more to it than that. when you see Kurasaki's Ochi, you'll realize that. And he's like, yeah. And there's like a beauty to him. There's definitely a serenity, right? And definitely like a sereneness to him that like fires up the rest of the team. And then we have Minato getting close. They're too conscious of their opponents for the second round. Yep. Okay. I'm glad that we don't really get much with Kurosaki, honestly, in this. I feel like we've gotten enough with Kurosaki the last 2 episodes to set up their rivalry and set up how they are as a team. So, and their dynamic against Kazumai. So, I really don't feel like we needed them in this episode. Obviously, Shu decides he's going to insert himself into the plot very deliberately. But I'm glad we didn't get the twins. We didn't need the president. We didn't need any of them involved in this. I liked the focus was mainly on our boys dealing with their own issues during the tournament. And so then poor Ryohei has the fault. Like, his string comes undone. It counts as a shot. It's really sad. I felt bad for him. But at least he got to restring his bow. Seiya does really well, right? He does pretty well. And then now doesn't do bad, right? And then poor Minato. So we go back to the first set of hits, right? Did we see what the hits were? We saw this episode's called Taking Aim, which is... taking aim, not only at the targets, but then Shu, like, taking aim to, like, fire at this team. Oh, my God. So, did we get anything for the first round? Yeah, Kaido's, they're not happy. They're clearly dejected after that first round of hits. Like, and I love the tension when we cut to them sitting there, because that's so palpable and real. Like, if you go to a tournament and you have a bad day, and you and your teammates, y'all know you screwed up, and you're just sitting there like... Like, just that feeling, like that awkward tension, it's there, right? And Ryohei, of course Ryohei takes the blame, right? Ryohei takes responsibility. He takes the blame for them. And I love that the team's like, no, they're like, it's fine. You are okay. You're not at fault here, right? He's like, it's not on you, Ryohei. They're like, yeah. And then Kaido's like, yeah, no, we tripped ourselves up. No one is to blame. And so that's when the guy from the archery store comes over. I kind of love it. I love Nozaki-san. I love that he's like, oh, you're from the archery supply store. And he's like, that fault earlier. He's like, I sold you. I love that he's like, did I sell you faulty string? Like, I'll give you a discount and new string if you want. And that's when Ryohei is like, no, I didn't want to use the bad string. He's like, I thought I could hit better if it was something I was used to rather than something new. And he's like, oh, no, I get it. He's like, no, that makes sense. He's like, good. He's like, I'm glad it wasn't my merchandise. I'm glad you weren't going to write a bad review for my stuff. I'm glad that wasn't the case. But he's like, you could have used this new string. You would have been fine. And then he offers to help. He's like, can I help your bow and like help have a look at it? And I love that Ryohei, he gets so worked up and emotional that he like just kneels in front of him saying he's sorry. And this guy's like, whoa, easy kid. It's okay. Chill out. He's so worked out. And even Kaido, I like Minato and Nanao are both like, Ryohei, best boy. And Kaido's like, damn it. I feel like Kaido and Ryohei's relationship is really interesting because Kaido, you would think that Kaido would not like Ryohei on the outskirts because Ryohei is such a genuine, like, best boy. You would think Kaido would think that his antics are, like, fluffy and bubbly and just too sunny. But no. Kaido, I think, relates a lot to Ryohei. I think Kaido secretly wishes he could be more like Ryohei on the outside. I feel like Kaido's tough exterior is what everybody focuses on, and that's all he gets a rap for. But I feel like Kaido is a lot like Ryohei in how passionate and kind of vulnerable he is. He just doesn't have the strength that Ryohei does to just come out and be vulnerable. So it's fascinating, their relationship. Of all the relationships that I didn't think I would see a connection with, I did not think I'd see Kaido and Ryohei connecting. But they clearly do, and I like that. I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, so then he helps him with the bow, and he tells him who he is. And he talks about the target panic. He's like, and then, yeah, the guy's like, if you just keep calm, you'll hit. He's like, you're actually, like, pretty strong. I like that they established that if Ryohei is confident, if he's confident in himself, he can hit. He's like, that's all you gotta do. If you're just confident in yourself, you'll be fine. You got this. You got this. And Ryohei's like, okay. Right? I like Ryohei's like, okay, if you say so, sir. Like, he's just sure of himself. He's like, I guarantee it. And he says, yes, sir. And then he like wipes his eyes. It's like, oh, come on. And then he sees Masaki. So, of course, the guy that runs the store. So the store owner, I'll get him right, the store owner knows Masaki. He knows Masa, the store owner does. And he obviously knows about his target panic because he had the notes. And he clearly knows the grandpa. Again, I don't want any hints or clues. I don't want any spoilers. Nothing about the grandpa. We'll figure it out when we get to it. I want everybody to keep hushed about that because there's been a lot of people like, pay attention to the grandpa. I'm like, no, leave me alone. I know. I filed it away already. I know he's there, but we'll get stuff on it. I love that Rin just pops in like, you guys know each other? Rin's great. It all makes sense now why they're brothers but not brothers, right? He's like, why do you know Nozaki-san? And he's like, oh, you're brothers from your parents' remarriage. Yeah. So apparently I'm going to assuming that Masa's dad married Rin's mom. Okay. Got it. He's like, I can't believe it. He's like, I don't want to pry into your private lives or anything, but I wish you told me you became the coach. So he clearly knows these two from back in the day, right? And he's like, oh, sorry. He's like, you've been such a help, and I can't seem to make time to stop by. And he's like, yeah, you said it. He's like, you're giving me excuses. And so he says, but that Ochi kid before, he's like, he's got target panic. So he clearly knows about Masa's. And he's like, yeah. He's like, I ended up lending your target panic notes to the Nitiki kid, Ryuhei. He's like, if I'd known you were their coach, I have known not to bother, of course. And he's like, no, that's fine. And he's like, any way to teach is fine. He's like, I'm glad that he took the initiative to get the notes. It's totally okay. He's like, you didn't pry, but I'm curious why he has the notes to begin with, why he ended up with them. Curiouser and curiouser. He's like, the experience has taught me how much easier it is to just focus on your own form. And he's like, your kids had it pretty rough in the first half. He's like, what are you going to do as a coach? So I feel like this guy did archery as well, right? And Masa has a very hands-off approach. He's like, I'm not going to say anything. He's like, I'm going to let them figure it out. Masa is very hands-off. He knows how tense they are. He's going to let them figure it out. Because he knows how tense this group is. They're a little bit dramatic at times, especially Kaido. And Masa's like, if I say anything, it's not going to do any good. He's like, I'm just going to let it go. Let them figure it out. They know what their problem is. They just need to, they're this kind of team. He's like feeling teammates like this is one of those times where they need to figure out themselves. They need some quiet time to go reflect. And he's like, now that you're a teacher, do you understand a bit better how Yasaka sensei felt? So Yasaka. So the grandpa is Yasaka. Okay. And he's like, do you get how your grandpa felt? And he's like, well, actually, he's like, no, not yet. I'm afraid. He's like, I don't think, and we've established Masa doesn't really connect with his grandpa very well. And then we cut to Kaido and the blisters on his hands. And Kaido has this issue where he wants the hard work to pay off. And that's such a, God, that's so relatable though. Kaido's really relatable in these episodes because I know exactly how he feels. It's like when you put in the hard work for something like that, you want it to pay off and you want it to be good and you want it to, you're like, damn it, I want it to be fine and to be a great experience, damn it. And when it's not, it's so frustrating. And when you put in all this hard work and then you throw yourself off your own game and you're your own worst enemy, it's the worst feeling. I've done it before myself in competition where you second guess things and you think you're going to make decisions and you get caught up in trying to beat somebody and it just doesn't work. It's the worst thing you can do is self-implode like that. And it's awful. And I know exactly how Kaido feels and that frustration, right? And he just sits there like looking at his hand like, what do I do about this? And I like that he's sitting there making the thing. And Nanao tries to throw him off. Nanao tries to get him riled up because it'll bring him back down to reality. He tries to get him riled up. And it's interesting because Nanao's putting on a show, right? Nanao is putting on this facade to rile Kaido up. Nanao probably does not want, to have to do this to Kaido right now. He probably wants to leave him alone, but he knows Kaido will just fester and it'll just self-destruct. He's like, I need to be there for him. And this is how I know it works. Oh. And then he does the same thing. And Kaido, he's like, what the hell is your problem? Screw off. And I like Minato went off on his own. Minato went off on his own to like self-reflect. Seiya was told to stay away from him. So Seiya listened. So that is something too. Minato was off on his own. And Seiya listened and let him be. But he watched from afar, right? He watched from afar. Seiya is not concerned about himself. He's concerned about Minato. Kind of like Nanao is not concerned about himself. He's concerned about Kaido. And he's like, we're not on a battlefield. He's like, it's okay. He's like, you're not going to get killed if you miss a shot. He's like, so quit looking like a defeated warrior. And he's like, take it easy. It's okay. And Kaido says, I told you to screw off. He says, I take archery seriously. I'm not just doing it for fashion like you. And that was so hard because I was like, Nanao is not doing it for fashion. If Nanao was doing it for fashion, he'd be on the sidelines watching you play, but he wouldn't be doing it himself. So that was hard because I do think, here's the thing. This is the point where I'm like, okay, we know that Ryohei takes archery seriously. Ryohei wants to be a good archer for, here's the thing, for himself and the team. He definitely wants to do it for the team. Ryohei has said that multiple times. Like, I'm doing it for you guys too. But Ryohei also wants to he's also worked hard. He's helped himself improve. He's doing it for himself as well. He finds interest in it and he likes it, right? Kaido, he takes archery super seriously. He is very serious about it, right? Same with Minato. Minato loves archery. He loves archery and wants to do it. So that leaves Seiya and Nanao. Now, up until this point, yeah, sure. It could be argued that maybe Nanao is just doing it to follow Kaido around. But I think in this moment where we see the back of Nanao is to us with the jacket on and he's in the shadows looking down when Kaido yells at him, I do think that Nanao likes archery. But he also does it for Kaido. Just like Ryohei is doing it for the team, right? I think that Kaido and Minato do it very much for themselves. I think Nanao and Ryohei are doing it for the team and for individuals. And I think that Seiya is clearly doing it for Minato. But here's the thing. I do think Nanao is also doing it for himself as well. He's not just doing it for fashion. And then Kaido kind of realizes what he just said and he backtracks. And Nanao just looking at him like, are you done? Are you done? And Ryohei and Kaido realizes what he said and he's like, oh. And then he just gets mad at himself. And Nanao's like, did you have to get it out of your system? Do you feel better now? He's like, and yet somehow I hit more shots than you. So I must be taking it somewhat seriously. Your seriousness doesn't get you very far, does it? And he's like, what was that? And he's like, if you don't like it, hit more than I do. So I like that Nanao's like, I'm here being better than you at archery, so you'll get better. To prove me wrong. Prove that I'm just doing it for fashion. But I think that conversation is Nanao saying, I'm not just doing it for fashion. I am doing it because I enjoy it, but I'm mainly doing it for you, right? But I do think Nanao takes enjoyment in archery. Otherwise, why would he do it? Right? And he's like, I'm going to cool off. I think Kaido realizes, he realizes what he did, and he's like, I'm going to cool off, don't follow me. So Kaido and Minato are very, very similar, right? Just like Nanao and Seiya are very similar. And somehow Ryohei and Kaido are very similar. So we all got this they're all connected in one way or another, right? All connected. And I like that Kaido cools off. He's like, don't follow me. Got this. And Nanao's like, okay. He's like, sure, I won't follow you. And then that's when he's like, oh, Merha, Minato. I like that Minato was like looking over across the tree being like, hey, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but it looked like it was getting a little tense over here. So I love confession in the trees, just like with Free. Oh my God, and at the end too, it's a confession in the trees as well, right? Right, Huckleberry? Right? It's a confession in the trees. I like that that's what it was, literally, just like Free. Just like Free, it was a confession. It's great. But yeah, he's like, he has a little blush like, Merha, like, sorry, I was caught. And Nanau's like, I'm not going after Anogi because he's like, I've done enough. He's like, no. He's like, what does that mean? He's like, Kachan is awkward around others and himself. And the only time his guard slips up is with someone riles him up every now and then. So he's like, now, he's like, Kaido can be awkward. He can be awkward kind of socially, and he needs to get riled up by me to, like, keep on his toes. He says people tell him he looks and acts scary, and so he leans into it and builds up this tough guy persona, which he does. Yeah, he leans into it. He has this tough persona, and so when people tell him that he acts a certain way, he kind of just leans into it and follows along with what they say. And Nanao's like, I know he's not like that. I know that's not really him. He's like, I got to break it down a little so that he can be loved. He's like, I got to keep him from going too far and really becoming what they say he is. He's like, because I know he's not, right? He's like, that's why I'll keep pushing his buttons and dragging him along. I love it. I love it so much. I was like, he's like, that's why I'm here right now. That's why I shoot. He's like, I shoot because I care about Kaido and I want to keep him grounded. He's like, that's why. So he relates a lot to Seiya, right? He's shooting for Kaido. He's like, and I love this. His bangs are perfectly animated. He's like, I feel bad my motivations are a little more frivolous. But Monato's like, no. And I feel like Minato kind of connects to Nanao in that moment too. Because he's like, no. He's like, I kind of shoot for my mom and to hear that sound and to be with Shu. So he's like, I totally understand that. He's like, I get it. I get it. He's like, and the rest of you guys. And he's like, no. He's like, that's not true. I feel like in a way too, Shu is kind of similar to Kaido in that he's kind of socially awkward sometimes. So maybe Minato is bringing him back to reality, just like Nanao is bringing Kaido back to reality. I don't know. It's an interesting parallel. He's like, that's a fine reason to shoot. Minato sounds like a Southern belle. He's like, I think that's a fine reason to shoot Nanao. You shoot for that Kaido, that Kachan. I love it. He's like, Minato, you're looking at something else past the target. That's what fuels your shots. He's like, I feel like I understand where your strength comes from now. He's like, you're not just shooting at the target. You're seeing what's beyond it. It's like, love it. Love it. I love Nanao's bangs are so perfectly animated though. And he's like, there's a limit to how far someone like me can go. We're hanging on by sheer bullheadedness. So Nanao thinks that he's got a limit. He's got a limit based on his talent. He's basically acknowledging that Shu and Minato and Kaido and Seiya and them have a lot of skill. They have the talent to go further. He's like, I'm only gonna get so far. He's like, I can only go as far as I know I can go. He's like, people who start with real talent and dump all their stats into archery. He's like, I like archery a lot, but I've not gone all in on it. I'm not maxing out my archery stat on my chart here. You guys are. He's like, and that's fine, but that's not Nanao, right? I can't ever beat people like that. And I like that the episode, the lens loses focus as he says that. It's a cool stylistic choice to make it do that. He's like, people like you, Minato. He's like, it's true. You know that you can go further. And then I was like, no, I don't. And he's like, that's right. I wanted to ask, why do you shoot? And the answer that seems most obvious is that he's chasing the sound of the Tsurune. That's why he shoots. But then when he thinks about it, the first thing he thinks of is his mother, is that memory of his mom that he's shooting for, and the sound. So it's like, I feel like that's going to be the goal, is getting to the end of the series, the end of the season, and finding out from there, why is it that Minato shoots? We're going to find that out as we go, right? Okay. And he can't quite give an answer before Seiya and them show up. And he's like, hey guys, it's time to go. He's like, we need to go get ready for the round. He's like, oh, thanks, Prez. He's like, let's go, Minato. And so then Seiya watches Nanao leave. And he's like, you said you wanted to be alone, so I left you alone. Are you all right now? There is a curious little tone thing there where Seiya's like, you said you wanted to be alone, and then you went off and hung out with Nanao, so did you just not want to be around me? There is a little bit of anxiousness, right? There's a little bit of anxiousness around Minato, and I think envy or jealousy. And I say that lightly. I don't think that Seiya is jealous of Nanao. However, I do think that Seiya's kind of like, well, you said you wanted to be alone, and so I left you alone. He's like, did you just not want to be around me? I think Seiya is very self-conscious around Minato. He's very self-conscious, and whatever has happened between them, he still is feeling the after effects of it, even when Minato is not. Because Minato was not thinking about that. He's like, no, I'm fine. And Minato seems really fine. He's like, no, I got this. I'm good. And Seiya's like, oh, okay, I see. Good deal. And he seems pleased by that. He's like, yeah, I'm glad to hear it. And again, visually showing that even when Seiya and Minato are together, they are separated. There's a clear, definitive space between them, right? So we get back to the tournament, and they're all getting ready. Now, at one point, I think I might have skipped over it in the episode. I might have skipped over it, but at one point, they make the comment that Seiya is like a robot. Ryohei makes that comment. He's like, you're right. He's like, what, you guys think I'm a robot? And based on what Ryohei, because Ryohei said, you're so constant and determined, right? And I think that whole robotic thing with Seiya, it is brought up in this episode, and it does bring to light the idea that we don't know a lot about Seiya. We kind of have it's very distant with Seiya, right? We don't know a lot about him personally. We've gotten to know Kaido and his real personality, the facade he puts on, how he is on the inside. We're getting that with Nanao in this episode. We've gotten it with Ryohei. Ryohei is probably the most simple of the group, but I love him because he's so genuine and so like just straightforward. And with Minato, we're getting more with this child and backstory. Seiya is the loose end. He's the one we don't know a lot about yet. He's the one that is kind of out of the loop in terms of character development. And I feel like this last act is going to be like, yes, we're going to develop him. It's totally fine. But yeah, that first shot Kaido misses. And then Ryohei always has like a dead-eyed look, right? He just looks so nervous all the time. I'm like, Ryohei. And then he's like, just like when I developed target panic, I was trying to win then. At the finals, beating other schools, beating Seiya, beating Shu. So Minato, he let the competition get to him and throw him off, right? He let him throw it off. And from there, and I like to say it hits the arrow, he's like, that was all I could think about. And you see Fujiwara! It's like all eyes on Minato. All eyes on Minato. I do believe that Minato is jealous of Seiya. I do believe that Fujiwara, not Minato, I don't know why I said that. I do believe that Fujiwara is jealous of Seiya. Absolutely. Now, is Seiya jealous of Fujiwara? I don't necessarily think so. I think Seiya is worried that Fujiwara is going to trigger something with Minato. He's worried about him catching feels. I think Seiya's worried about Minato getting triggered from the past, whatever's happened with him and Fujiwara, and thinking that it's going to make him quit archery, right? To get overwhelmed. But I think Fujiwara is jealous of Seiya. I do. I think otherwise he wouldn't have came back like that, right? But Fujiwara's all eyes on Minato. All eyes on him. And so he's like, I'm sure that's how Onogi's feeling. The more obsessed you become, the further and smaller the target gets. Yeah, I love that line. I was like, the obsession leads to a further and smaller target. Okay, and I wonder if that's something that we'll touch base with Seiya, because Seiya seems pretty obsessed with like keeping Minato into archery and on track. So, and we'll talk about that though. I want to bring that up at the end about Seiya wanting to keep. I'll make a note of that. Seiya wanting to keep Minato in archery. We'll talk about that with Shu's words at the very end, because I think Shu says something that I don't quite agree with, and we'll talk about it though. And now hits the target, just like Seiya. And then we get to Minato. He says, why do you shoot? I like this now that inspires me. It's like what I'm aiming for. And everything's so great. I love all his colors are green. What I'm aiming for. And then I love that he just lets it go. And it's just beautiful. Like that, the sunlight hits that arrow just right. And it just like the sunlight comes out and it's a perfect bullseye. Ah, yeah. So good. And Seiya's like, beautiful. He released the second the shaft touched his cheek. He's like, what was that? He's like, it's still just for a short time, but he held his stance. It was a fine shot. I like Moss is like, oh, good. Good on you. You hit it. Yes, good. And then that gets Kaido fired up. He's like, listen to him getting that nice sound out. I need to stop being a poser. And the bow turns. The bow turns perfectly with Kaido. Ah, I love that. I love it. And then he's satisfied, and Ryohei's like, believe. That's all Ryohei has to say is believe. Just, oh. And Seiya doesn't say anything. And neither does Now. And then he manages to shoot, and it hits it. Yeah. Awesome. Yush. And so then we get to see their scores. I like that we basically did, all right, so Minato didn't make the last two. He made the first one. Seiya made all of them. Seiya made all his shots. And Kaido and Ryohei made 1 out of 4. And then Now made 3 out of 4. And so basically Seiya, he's hit all his shots. Again, I think Fujiwara is jealous of Seiya because Seiya is the biggest competition that he has. Seiya is the best shooter on their team by far, and Fujiwara knows it. I think Fujiwara is trying to get Seiya riled up to hurt them. I think that's what he's trying to do. He's jealous of him. He's like 20 hits out of 40. He's like at 50%. Will it get us through the prelims? It's unlikely, to be frank. I like that Kaido like thinks about, he's like, damn it, if only I could. And then Now says, hey, Now. He's like, oh, and they're here. The group match. I like that Ryohei shoves his way through. Now, I will say, tournament etiquette, Ryohei did a big no-no. Our team for speech, our coach was always like, no matter what happens, you go up and you see the results. You be professional about it. You walk back. When you get on the bus, you can cheer, shout, do whatever. He's like, but don't make a scene. Don't be foolish. And he'd always be like, don't be a fool. And Ryohei makes a big scene. He's like, we're in. I was like, oh my God. I was fully expecting the twins to come out and be like, you guys think you're going to beat us in the tournament? No. Or something like that. I was fully expecting it, but no. But we look on there, and then him seeing it that Kazami passes preliminaries. I love Ryohei's little sweet boy face. What a bean. What a bean. I want to get a picture of that. What an absolute bean. Oh my God. Where he's like, we did it. We're in. And I love that they all just like pass out. I love that they all pass out. Oh, it's so great. They all just melt into the floor. It's so good. He's like, we did it. And he's like, I've never been so nervous in my life. And he's like, oh, you were nervous too now. He's like, well, of course I was. He says, you're always so easygoing. I didn't think you ever got nervous. He's like, I'm still a very delicate person. So yeah, then now he is delicate, but he is dedicated. That's the thing. He is delicate, but he's dedicated. I was like, good on you now. All right. So yeah, and he's like, the real Iron Man is Seiya. So he says it. The real Iron Man is Seiya. And Seiya's like, you make me sound like a robot. So that's the thing, right? Seiya right now seems the most like a robot. He seems the most ironclad, like nothing can break him. But I don't think that's the case at all. I think that's all in Act 2. And then Minato thanks Kaido. He's like, thank you. And Kaido's like, he's like, you got mad on my behalf yesterday. He's like, that's why you tried to win and you got out of your groove. He's like, you're trying to, defend me. And I like that Kaido's like, well, I love the facial expressions. The animation on Kaido's face in this episode is so good. He's like, that ain't how it was. He's like, I'm just doing what any teammate would do. He's like, any teammate would do that. And it's like, okay. He's like, don't make it out about you, you dumbass. He's like, I still want to say thank you. And I like the Kaido's like, you're welcome. It's so cute. He's like, how can you look so calm anyway? Aww. You think I'm satisfied with this? You got another thing coming. And I like that Minato's like, same here. He's like, I'm not satisfied with this result at all. And Kaido's like, oh, he's like, how could I be? we can do better than this. Right? And Kaido's like, it's like, yeah, oh, please. Like, I need to hear that from you. It's the craziest thing, right? Because shipping wise, it's the craziest thing. Like, you would think that this show would want us to ship Kaido and Minato because they're like the inner team rivals. They're like the Haru and Rin, right? But I don't really ship them together. Not really. I could. If somebody told me they shipped Minato and Kaido, I'd totally see it. Especially after this episode. I totally see it because Minato does go out of his way to talk a lot to Kaido, and he's learning about Kaido through the now. So I guess if you told me you shipped them, I would not blame you. I think I don't feel it myself. I don't feel it. And the thing is, I want to feel it. I want to ship them together, but it doesn't hit the same way. Like, they hit like best friends. Like, they hit like two best friends that like were rivals became friends. Rivals to friends, maybe to lovers, who knows? But I just don't hit it that way. But yeah, and then he's like, we're going to win next time. I do think that now is like, he sees what a good influence Minato is to Kaido and approves. I do think there's that. And I like that Masa and Tommy then were like, well, how bittersweet. This is quintessential youth. Mm-hmm. I like Masa's like, yes, good. Things are turning around. About damn time. I like that Tommy Sensei looks up at him like, guess you get to keep your job. He's like, and things are turning around for you, Takigawa-kun. And Masa's like, what? What do you mean things are turning around for me? I feel like Tommy's like, you're getting to be a coach. He's like, you're proving yourself as a coach. And I like that Masa's like, I ain't done shit. He has. It's just funny because he's been saying to everybody he's taking a hands-off approach. So it seems like he's not doing much, but he actually is being a very strong presence there. And then they're like, oh, and I like that Masa's like, okay. And he's like, congratulations on passing the preliminaries. Those shots in the second half were impressive. Truly magnificent. And he's like, well, thank you very much, Rio. He's like, oh, doll, shucks. And then Minato's like, Masa-san, I still don't know exactly why you made me the Ochi. And it's like, he made you the Ochi because you inspire the team from the back to the front. Like, you pass on that energy, right? And he says, but I'm glad that you did. It helped me feel like I could shoot more naturally. And then Masa's like, I love Masa gives the head pats. He's like, that's all that matters. As long as he's like, I'm not telling you why I did it, but as long as you feel like it was a good choice, that's all that matters. And he does like the head ruffle. He's like, you worked very hard, Minato. And it's like, oh, and Minato's like, thanks, Sensei. Thanks. Again, I can't quite ship them now because it's very much like student-teacher relationship. And I'm like, I can't do it. But if they got older, sure, I could see it. All right. He's like, all right. Then he gives Kaido a head pat. He's like, all right, I gave you a head pat, but now I'm not going to give my other Baka student, my other problem child a head pat. And I love that Fujiwara looks over like, I want a head pat. The cut over to Kurosaki being like, they barely made it from the preliminaries and they're getting head pats. We get waxed with a stick if we don't do good. And I like the twins look like kind of grumpy over there in the corner, but Fujiwara, looking from afar. And just when you think the episode's over, we got like 4 minutes left. You're like, oh, the episode's wrapping up. No big deal. Everything's fine. Then Kiwani's like, this series, the episodes go by so calmly, and in the last 3 to 4 minutes, they're like, you ready for some shit to happen? And it's like, wait, what? No! But it does! And so yeah, we cut out to Minato walking back on his own. And Fujiwara's just standing there. He's like, I've been waiting for you, Minato. You could put like horror music up next to this. And to be fair, I ship the hell out of Fujiwara and Minato right now because I'm so intrigued. I want to know their past. I want to know this. But Fujiwara comes out and makes a damn straight confession to him. A straight up confession. Right now. Right here. In my salad. Just right there. He like stands in the middle of the green road and he's like, Minato. And he's like, I want to reach to greater heights. And he's like, I can't make it there by myself. He's like, you're the only one that can go there with me. And it's like, what? So Fujiwara, he's like, I can't get better without you. I've been training all this time, but I need you. You complete me. He basically just said, you complete me. Off the record, he said, I can't make it there by myself. He straight up said, I need you, Minato. If you would like to give me a heterosexual explanation, please down in the comments do so, because I need to hear this. I have many heterosexual guy friends. They don't tell each other that they need them. I don't know. You have the potential to reach the same heights that I do. So please climb back up quickly. I'm like, but here's the thing. Fujiwara, this is a bit in Seiya's defense. Fujiwara asks Minato to quickly climb up to meet him. Right? Seiya has been very much, let's do this entire series. Seiya has been very much like, we're going to do this at our own pace. I'm not going to force Minato to do something. I'm going to go with the flow. Let Minato get back into it. Ease him back into it. Seiya's always been afraid to push Minato because he feels like he's going to push him too far and he's going to run away. Shu is not afraid to push him too far. He's like, no, do the damn thing. And Seiya has been like very hands off this whole time. So you have two people, two very quick, different approaches. And then Fujiwara says, you appeared out of the blue and you changed my life. You need to take responsibility for that. You made me fall in love with you, damn it. Now do something, take responsibility for taking my heart. And it's like, holy shit. He basically says that you changed my life. So you better not leave me. So don't leave me hanging. I'm like, oh my God. Like, Fujiwara just basically straight up confessed to him, like, I need you to get on my level because you complete me. And I need you to take responsibility for making me fall head over heels for you. With your haircut and everything. It's like, oh my God. And Minato's just like, okay. And does Minato give an answer? No, he just walks away. He doesn't even wait for Minato's answer. He just leaves Minato. And he's like, at the prefectural tournament, I'm going to shoot the best shots I can. And that's all he says. And he's like, I hope so. So yeah, so that it's interesting here. Fujiwara is suggesting, he's like, I need you to be good so that I can be good too. And Minato's like, well, I like that Minato says, I'm not going to be good for you, but I'm going to do the best that I can. So I hope that's good enough. And Fujiwara seems like it is, but I'm like, straight up and confesses, like right at the end of the episode. And then Minato's like, okay, well, that was an encounter. Like, Minato's just like, well, this boy just told me he needed me and confessed to me, so that's that. I guess I'll just shoot the best I can tomorrow. Oh my God. And then Fujiwara. Here's the thing. Fujiwara's like, he's like, is that you, Seiya? And he just comes out from behind the tree. Confessions in the forest. Kiyoani cannot have a sports anime without a forest time confession. Cannot happen. Not possible. And like, Seiya's been stalking him the whole time. And he's like, don't work Minato up too much, Shu. So Seiya is worried about Minato backtracking and getting like Kaido was, getting too focused. And then, so here's the thing. We've established in this episode that Minato, he got worked up about Shu and Seiya and winning. And then he got target panic. And then he's worked to get better. And now he says he's going to do the best he can and not worry about the others winning. And Seiya is afraid that if Shu keeps pushing him, he's going to regress and go back to like how Kaido was in this episode. And I don't blame Seiya for saying that. He's like, hey, don't get Shu worked up. Like, quit forcing him to go so fast. Because that's the thing. Seiya's like, let him go at his own pace and be calm. You're getting him too worked up. He's like, don't work him up too much, Shu. He's not on firm footing yet. So you have two friends who have a very different approach to Minato's situation. Seiya's approach is like, let's let him get his footing and ease back into this. And Fujiwara's like, no, you need to like get on track. You need to like motivate yourself. Let's do this. And then Seiya says getting him riled up could throw him off his rhythm again. Exactly. And so then Shu sits there and contemplates. It goes in one ear and out the other, and the whole time he's just thinking of like the biggest comeback he can come up with. And Shu's like, okay, Seiya, let's be real. He's like, why did you go to Kazumai? And Seiya's like, easy, to bring Minato back to archery. To bring him back. That's why. But here's the kicker. Shu is like, that's an odd thing to say. He would have come back without you. And at the time in the reaction, I was like, you homewrecker. But here's the thing. This is the rub. This is what I think is going to create the angst with Seiya. It's the fact that Minato didn't come back to archery because of Seiya. He came back to archery because of Masa. That's the kicker. The whole time that Seiya was trying to get him to come back and treading on eggshells and trying not to be too much, the whole time he was doing that, it wasn't affecting Minato, and he wasn't coming back because of Seiya. But the moment he met Masa and was influenced by him and Ryohei and Kaido, he came back because of that, not because of Seiya. That's the rub. That's the like the hard truth that like rubs salt into the wound. It's that Seiya's been trying to do this to help Minato, but Fujiwara's like, it wouldn't have mattered. He didn't come back for you. He came back on his own without you. And Seiya, we don't see his face. And she was like, am I wrong? And then, of course, like, we get, like, everything, like, closing in, and Seiya realizes what we realize. Like, no, he didn't come back because of Seiya. He's like, why don't you stop chasing Minato already? You can't keep up with him anymore anyway. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. At that point, I was like, okay. Fujiwara tells Seiya to quit chasing. But in the same breath, I'm like, it's kind of a double thing. I don't feel like, because Seiya's a better archer right now than Minato. He's better at archery. He's had more hits than Minato. But I think that what Fujiwara is saying is like, you need to give up on Minato because he's not going to like you back like you like him. Get out of my way so that I can make a move. And it's like, oh my God. Oh my God. Fujiwara came in and said, I'm making this a love triangle, damn it. I was like, oh shit. I was like, oh my God. Fujiwara's like, I chose violence. I was just like, oh my God. Even he's so emotionless when he says it. And Seiya's like, what the hell? And Fujiwara's just like, this is how I am. And he's like, what do you mean by that? And Fujiwara is just like, because you don't love archery. And Seiya's like, what? Making me have an existential crisis. But here's the thing. Does Seiya love archery? This whole time, I feel like Nanao and Seiya need to have a heart-to-heart now. Nanao and Seiya need to have a heart-to-heart because I do think Nanao likes archery enough that he does it. He just does it for Kaido. But I feel like the same thing could apply for Seiya. Seiya does it for Minato, but he likes archery too, right? He makes the comment to Tommy Sensei. He made the comment to Tommy Sensei that he is a perfectionist. He wants to make the archery club excel and do well, even when Minato wasn't there. So I feel like Fujiwara's wrong in that aspect, but maybe not. But then is that okay? Because I feel like Nanao and Seiya need to have a heart-to-heart talk about this. They need to talk about the boys that they're keepers of, that they're watching, and have a discussion about this. I honestly didn't think we'd have a love triangle between Seiya and Minato and Fujiwara, but she was like, I want drama, bitches. And so we are. But I still feel like I still get very platonic best friend vibes from Seiya and Minato. I don't get that Seiya is romantically interested in Minato. I think Seiya is concerned for Minato as a friend and is hyper obsessed with making sure that Minato stays in archery because he knows Minato could be really good at it, and he knows that Minato wants to be good at it, and the archery is tied to his happiness, and Seiya wants him to be happy, but Fujiwara is all on board the Minato train. If Fujiwara comes in like Sosuke in season 2 of Free and is just like, you need to stay away from Minato, and you don't know what's best for him. That's exactly what this is. That's exactly what is. Sorry if I'm spoiling free for you all. Free spoilers, just tune me out for the next 30 seconds. But Seiya is basically like Haru, and Minato's like Rin. Minato was off his game, but he's getting better. And Fujiwara comes in like Sosuke Yamazaki, and it's just like, you need to get better because you need to be on my level. Only the thing is, Fujiwara is more like Albert than Sosuke in terms of talent. So it's like, that's the big difference, right? But, oh my God. I was like, Fujiwara just came in to wreck this house and to assert his dominance. I'm like, dear God. Oh my God. And I just feel so bad for Seiya by the end of this. I feel bad for Seiya. I felt bad for Nanao in this. I feel bad for Seiya because I feel like they are two characters that are doing all they can for the people that they care about, and that they're getting criticized for not liking archery themselves. And I'm like, but they have to an extent, right? So, again, I hope that we get some one-on-one between Seiya and Nanao, and they talk about Kaido Minato. I really want that. I think that needs to happen at this season, especially for Seiya to get over Fujiwara's words, because dear God, Fujiwara just came in and was like, today's the day. I'm not just going to sit around willy-nilly. I'm going to confess to my love and slay his enemies. I'm like, oh. Mm-hmm. Rule of 8, y'all. The rule of 8 has yet to leave me down. Yet to let me down. Mm-hmm. I really hope y'all enjoyed this reaction discussion. This episode was wonderful. So many character moments, so much to talk about, so much to think about. I'm very, very excited by what this season has given us. And I was telling people in the Discord, what I'm really excited about is that right now, I kind of almost want to watch ahead because I don't want to be spoiled. But I know that once the new season starts, I won't have to worry about being spoiled because we'll all be on the same page. We will all not know what's happening and coming. So I just gotta get to that point. But we have 4 episodes. We have 9, 10, 11, and 12. We have 4 episodes left of season 1. I really hope, I've heard the movie is coming out in January. I really hope we get stuff with the movie, but I don't know how long that's going to be. So, and I don't know exactly when season 2 is coming out. I think it's the end of January, but we'll see. So, but I'm really, really excited. So I hope y'all are too, right? So in any case, I hope y'all enjoyed this reaction discussion. I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with episode 9 of Tsurune. Bye.